Jill Schlesinger, hello from, I'm in Pennsylvania today. I'm at my mom's house. So
Very nice.
She's got a couple cats that run around, so that they might end up in my screen. You are where?
I am in New York City on the Upper West Side in my apartment.
And we, just before we started recording, well, really my first question for you. So by the way, obviously I do everybody knows Jill, and you've been doing this for a long time, and you've been on every TV show and CBS and all. And so you've got lots of broadcasting. I'm more of a radio guy. Mm-hmm. So I know you do radio and podcasts, but you also do TV. So you're TV too. But you started in this industry were you a commodities trader?
I was a gold, silver, and copper options trader. Options, which have gotten a bad rap, my friends.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, not everyone should trade them, but my dad was in the business. My father was a trader on the floor of the American Stock Exchange. I worked for him. I clerked for him. Oh, you want some visual? You
Yes,
want a little visual? Hold
yeah.
on a second. Well, watch this, guys. This is real, in real time. Hold on.
I don't know what Jill's going to go get, but.
I know, right? Okay, hold on a second. Here's my dad.
On the on the Amex?
That's on the Amex, on the American Stock Exchange. Check that out. Is that a great shot?
That's
1982.
Okay.
And here's his badge.
831, Albert.
831, Big Al. And so I worked for him summers. I would go and work for him. And then his best friend from college was a big trader on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. So I worked there. And so when all of my friends were getting fancy jobs and job offers in the late 80s, working for places like Salomon Brothers or Goldman Sachs or Payne Weber, I went down to the floor of the Commodities Exchange. I became I believe, this could be, I may be dating myself, but in 1987, I was the youngest person to be trading on a seat on the floor of the Commodities Exchange. There's my badge.
Jill.
So, I mean...
That's cool.
There's a little bit of that. But, look, this
is... by the way, you went to Brown, so it's not like they have... Isn't everyone from Brown like a writer? I mean, did you really...
Or a protester in my years? No, there was no... So my parents were shocked that I cared about where my sister and I went to school. So my sister went to Penn, I went to Brown. We grew up in very privileged suburbs, and everyone was going to school. So, when I went to Brown, I went to play soccer. So I was recruited to play soccer. So I really didn't care. Whatever, they had classes, they were fine. I was going to be, I don't know what I thought I was going to be, like a professional soccer player,
athlete.
whatever.
Yeah,
there was no professional soccer then. But my parents and my dad specifically, he was like, don't be an economics major, super boring. Just get a good education. Find out who the best professors are. Just take those classes. And that's kind of what I did. So I was, I think, officially my major, which at Brown we called a concentration, was international relations. So a little poli-sci, a little econ, a little this, a little that, and a little bit of, and then also English, because I love to read. So, but I graduated, it didn't matter, because, idiots, if you had a heartbeat, you could get a job. It's not like now. And there was a huge, strong economy, a bull market. Mm-hmm. So I got this job. I was a trader on the floor. 3, 4, 5 years later, I was like, oh, this is horrible. I really thought I was going to take over my dad's business. I didn't. And I did not love trading. I wasn't a great trader. I was a decent trader.
By the way, for our audience, because there's very few humans on the floor of any exchange anymore. So
right.
What was that? Just maybe give us a quick window on what, for the 25-year-old listening, they're like, what do you mean? You were at your computer trading? Or no, Jill was not at the computer. Explain what this was like.
So there were these things called physical trading floors. And the best thing that you can do if you want to see the place where I worked is to go stream a movie called Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd and Jamie Lee Curtis. And so what the kind of trading floor that I worked on is called an open outcry floor. There's a pit, and which is a circle, right, and it has steps down, and each step is sort of a tier in the process. So the people who stand at the top are the people who say, I have an order to buy or sell something. And the people who are sort of, they're down at the bottom are the people who are the folks who say, I'll either buy it for myself or maybe I'd buy it for someone else. But generally, we trade it for ourselves at the bottom. And so it was crazy. I mean, I always used to say that the trading floor, at least for commodities or in the Chicago Merc and some of the Philly exchange was like this too, that those exchanges were something like a rugby scrum meets a fraternity party, something like that.
Yeah,
and,
so it was like literally you're getting bumped around. I always think of people getting bumped around. That's correct. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was funny. I just ran into a guy who is a trader on the Merc in New York, the New York Mercantile Exchange, is where crude oil is traded. It's a huge exchange. And I recognized him. You know, we're all 100 years older. But I said, oh, Tommy, I remember you so well. And he's like, I don't really remember you. I said, well, I was in the part of the trading floor where you never went. I wanted to trade in the oil pit because that's where all the action was in the 80s. And I remember my boss saying, you're not big enough.
Oh, literally. Physically, you need to be like a...
You got to be big.
Yeah.
You got to be. There were no... And so, by the way, hardly any women. So on the commodities exchange, which is right, sort of the same room as the mercantile exchange, we traded gold, copper, and silver. And then the options, the derivatives of those futures contracts. I was an options trader. There were 800 male members.
800?
800, and there were 8 women. So I was one of 8, and I was 20.
You're a 1%er.
I am.
Right from the beginning.
And by the way, happily starting there. Thank God I didn't go backwards. It's always awful to grow up with advantage and then you slide back. That's the worst. So anyway, so I did that for a bunch of years.
But then how did you become but take me to you did that, then you were in the RIA industry. I know you're a CFP, but then how did you get into all the broadcasts? I mean, CBS News is like, I don't know, that's like the major league. So when did you break into that?
So I became as you said, I became an advisor. I found my way to a firm that was a teeny tiny firm. A friend of a friend said, oh, you should come do this. And I was like, ugh, I want to work at your rinky dink dopey firm. I actually said that out loud.
Yeah.
And then, I owned it. I became the owner of the rinky dink
dump
firm.
Yeah. How long would you like, I'm going to buy this place after how long?
No. So I joined this company and I liked the idea that from the planner perspective that I could kind of marry 2 parts of me, which is I could actually use my little math head, which I loved, and also help people. Because when you're a trader, you use your math head, but you don't help anybody. And I think that was the missing piece for me, that there had to be some way that it didn't excite me to work on a trading desk or to be an investment banker. I couldn't find anything that interesting in the process. And, since I come from the industry in terms of my DNA, I knew what all these jobs were. And I knew that it was baloney. Like, oh, yeah, you feel so good taking a company public. Like, I mean, yeah, you make a lot of money, but you don't feel good. And you feel good if you say, Wes, tell me what your financial situation is, and I help you get there. That's when you feel good. Mm-hmm. So I met these guys. They owned this teeny firm. There were 4 people who worked there. And I was like, whatever. Who cares? I really said that. I was like, what's the worst that happens? I learned. And so I'm not a big risk taker in general, but I am a very big risk taker career-wise. I never felt like there was any downside. All right, so I go in this company, and it's a year later, and they're like, you should buy, we're 50-50 partners, these 2 people, and they said, you should buy a third of it. I'm like, okay. And then 14 years later, I left. But it was great. It was good fun. Part of the way that we actually made money was that you got people to come in and you said, I'm going to charge you to do your financial planning and I'm going to charge you to invest for you.
Like a fee, was it fee only or was it?
No, I was not that evolved. No way. I always say to the people at NAPFA, they gave me a nice award a few years ago and I'm like, you never would have you would have hated me.
In the beginning.
Yeah, totally. I was like commission based, then I was fee based, but I did a million different things. I was like, I didn't care. I wanted to hustle, I wanted to make some money, and we wanted to grow the company. So
That's still okay, by the way, in the Retire Sooner podcast world. It's okay to want to make some money. That's okay.
I mean, you know what Mrs. Schlesinger says? She's very famous for this. My mother, rich or poor, it's nice to have money.
Rich or poor, it's nice to have money. All right.
Either way, it's just nice. A lot of options there. So my partner came from the insurance industry. Okay. He was an unbelievable salesperson. I got to tell you, like some of those insurance folks, man, they are amazing. And so he was really good. And I knew I knew sort of like more of the macro stuff and money management stuff. So he kind of taught me how to sell. And I gave him like here's how you actually invest for, the long term and the things you look at. And it was a good combination. But, it was maybe 1993, 4. And, I remember saying to him, I cannot make cold calls. I can't even make warm calls. I had a client who was the general manager of a local radio station. And I went to him. I said, you have this numbskull on the air. He's terrible. I couldn't be as bad as that. Maybe I could host a radio show about financial stuff. And that's what happened. And I talked my way. So
you did this early 90s, like mid-90s, you were on the radio.
Yeah. So I did radio when we had cart machines and we ran our own board and all that stuff, stuff that you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's like a Betamax of audio or VHS. And then we hosted this radio show, my partner and I, and it was a call-in radio show, and it was great. We got huge exposure, and I was living in a city in New England called Providence, Rhode Island, small townish, and even though it's a city, and it's the kind of thing where you're on the radio, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh, I heard you on the radio," and then the guy who hosted the show that would go local show that went on television before the Today Show called me one day and he goes, I don't know if you know me, but I host the show. I'm like, of course, he's like a local hero. He says, would you ever do television? I said, it's so funny you're calling me because I interned at your TV station when I was in college for 4 years. And so I went back to that place.
So wait, you interned at NBC?
Yeah, I interned at an NBC affiliate in Providence called WJAR. It was a monster station.
Okay,
it was a monster. And I really I thought I was going to be a sports producer. That's what I thought I was going to do with my life. Okay. But then I found out that meant you made no money for a long time.
I keep telling one of my kids that. That's all he wants to do in the world. So kids still want to do that, by the way.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I just
sounds like the best job. Yeah.
It is the best job, except you make no money.
Yeah.
And when I figured that out, that's when I went. So I had the summer after my junior year of college, I did an internship with a communications company and and a job working for my dad's firm. And one was like, this is what they gave us. I'm not even kidding you. Like the stipend we'll give you $15 a week for the subway. That was what she gave you. And then
for
the week. Yeah. Nice. And then my dad's firm made a ton of money. It was like 1986. Everyone was making money and all the clerks got bonused out. I got a $5,000 check just at the end of the summer because I was part of a team that processed a lot of business.
So you're like, this is where I'm going. I'm not. No way I'm doing media. Yeah.
No. Yeah. So I went back to media and I just used it to grow the business. That was the only reason I was doing media. There were two really instrumental people, a guy who was a program director at a radio station and the woman who was the news director at the TV station. Both of them said to me, you have a natural ability to do this. And even though this is not your job, we really want you to think of it as, what you're doing, at least let us help you. And so both of those people became extraordinarily important in my career development. So, one guy he's a huge radio guy now. And I won an award a couple of years ago and I first started with thank you, Bill Hess. He runs a lot of radio stations. And so, and the woman was very young news director, one of the few female news directors in the NBC owned and operated system. And I had met somebody in New York and I was kind of splitting my time between New York and Providence. And she's like, I know some people who know people. And then I started doing TV and I was a guest and that lasted kind of in the 2000s. And I was doing a ton of TV just as a guest to come on because I could translate really complicated, weirdo things. And
to on the Today Show.
Not on the Today Show. So I was on CNBC a bunch as like somebody was like, hey, she's a money manager and she talks to real people. I didn't have like super wealthy clients. I had
Kind of Millionaire Next Door.
I had more of like a Millionaire Next Door, but even, I was always most people in the financial planning business want to go after the biggest fish. And I said, well, if all the people are chasing the biggest fish, what about the not so big fish? Like they're good size, but they're not huge. So we built a business on people. So in the 90s and the early 2000s who had money like $500,000 to $2 million to invest. And we would always violate our own idea of minimum when we just liked somebody or we thought someone had a really good
earning
growth
potential.
perspective.
Yeah.
And so we just never held firm to that. It's one of the funny things I think about, like many of the guys in the industry and the gals in the industry. We have minimums. I'm like, all right, good luck. You're going to lose a lot of great people.
So when you made the transition so there was a point when was media taking over and you were like, look, I'm going to get out of the.
Well, we had sold our firm. We were rolling up.
Oh, you did sell it. Okay.
We had employment contracts. I was like way done. And as it, I wanted out. I wanted to move back to New York. It's where my family is. I didn't think I was ever going to who could imagine that I was going to spend, 10 or 12 years in Rhode Island? It was not what I had thought my life would be. And I stayed there because of the business, but we had sold the business. We were earn out. And then I kind of was like, I'm done with this. And let me out of my contract. He's here. He can run it, whatever. And we had plenty of really good people in place. And in the beginning of 2009, I found myself with no job. And, there was a financial crisis. And my girlfriend worked for a big Wall Street bank. And so, we were fine. But, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I had been doing a ton of just, appearances on CBS. I got a call in the beginning of February of 2009 from CBS, the network. And, hi, I'm head of talent. I'd love you to come in. And that's how it started. And I said, I don't want a job. I said, I'm exhausted. I've been running my own company. I've worked so hard, killer. And I didn't make enough money to be like, I've done money and I can never work again. But it was a good, I had a good exit. I had a good exit, right? And I said, I'm not going to work. I don't want to do this. They said, well, we're starting this new part of the broadcast and we're going to have a website and we'd love you to be the face and the voice of the website. And I don't want it. Well, come in and talk to us. I said, fine. 3 weeks later, I signed a contract. And now that was like March or April, I signed a contract. And so I've been there ever since.
What was that originally called? Is that just a division
Money
of CBS?
Watch. It was CBS Money Watch. So I had a really kind of a funny thing. I first started working for the interactive division of CBS.
Isn't there still CBS Money Watch, or is it something else now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So remember, there were two very confusing names. Kids, don't do this. You say to yourself, isn't it funny? People will mistake us for Market Watch and will grab extra share. It's not at all what happened. What happened was everyone's like, wait, I thought you worked at Market Watch. I don't see you I don't see you there.
It's Money Watch, not Market Watch.
So it was CBS Money Watch. And then I did the thing, again, completely counterintuitive. I left the interactive side where all the growth was, and I went to the broadcast side. The broadcast side, which is the television network and the radio network, still paid tons more money than the interactive side.
Yeah.
So I was like, what am I doing? And so what was funny is that the folks who I worked for, all the different divisions, they said to me, you're never going to make money on the interactive side for a while. You better come over here. Mm-hmm. And so I went over, and I've been there ever since. And so my role is I'm called, alternatively, the CBS News business analyst. Sometimes
I did see that business,
business analyst made up. I made it up with a guy. One of the women who's like a high-ranking person in the organization said, "What's your title going to be?" I said, "Well, I'm not really a correspondent. I analyze stuff." Mm-hmm. She's like, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "Financial analyst?" She goes, "Nah, that sounds like a stupid Wall Street term."
Yeah.
I said, how about business analyst? Oh, perfect. Let's put that down. She and it's still in the system. She put it in as senior business analyst, which it's like when the security guy calls me And I say, tell me what it says on the screen. He'll say, it says senior business analyst. I said, oh, God, it's still there. It was made up.
All right, Jill. So let's go. I want to dive into some money things. I wanted to ask you. Well, there's a couple of things. I want to talk about dumb things smart people do with their money. That is your book. I want to talk about, you do so many great calls and real life. You did a great call recently with someone who wanted to retire early. It was a wife. Wife and husband. The wife was 49. She said, I want to retire at 53. I want to talk about that. But maybe first, because you just kind of chronicled a little bit of how you got going in this business before you transitioned to full media. For you, I mean, let's say people come to you all the time, I'm sure, and even though you're not managing money right now, I'm sure people all the time are like, Jill, how do I manage my money? I've got $1 million, or I've got 500 grand, I've got 5 million. What do you? What's your favorite investment style? How do you invest, or tell people? If your mom, Mrs. Schlesinger, Jill, what do I do with this money? Like, what do you tell them to do?
So to know yourself, first of all, and figure out what you want. Do I just want to manage money, or do I have real financial planning needs? Most people will come through the front door with, how do I invest my money? But behind that are much more important questions. When can I retire? How am I going to pay for my kids' college education? How much life insurance do I need? I haven't done my estate planning because my wife and I can't agree on a guardian for our kids. All those things are really important. So I think that's critical. There are so many people who listen to my podcast and my radio show or see me on TV, and, they don't need a financial advisor, a full-time planner. They really don't. So why not? Because they have 3 basic goals in life. One is that they have to actually accumulate an emergency reserve fund. The second thing is they need to pay down consumer or student loan debt. And the third is that they haven't yet actually maximized their retirement contributions. And until you can do all 3 of those, you kind of don't need anybody.
Yeah.
Everything else is academic at that point. When you get beyond that, like you said, $500,000, $1 million, then it's a question of, do I just need money management, or do I need financial advice? And do I really want to do money management myself? You really shouldn't pay for money management anymore. I find that that's the thing that is so fascinating now. Like, you got some guy or gal at one of these big wirehouses, okay? And, let me manage your money for 1%. That's a very dumb decision in my world, because I see that as, but you can do that for 1/4%. Tell me what else this person is doing. Are they helping you with your tax planning? Are they helping you with your retirement planning? Are they really thinking about the way you pass assets to your family? Then, maybe they're worth it. But for just straight up money management, you might as well throw your money out the window, because they're not going to do anything. They are not what they usually say they do, which is, we deliver alpha, which means baloney. It means that they beat the market in these really weird periods of time when we know most of the time no one beats the market.
Yeah. So for you, from an investment standpoint, do you use one of the robos, or do you do all indexes, or?
It's all index all the time, baby. And some, I shouldn't say that. It's mostly all index, with the exception of, I live in New York City, so I have individual municipal bonds, meaning that I live in a very high tax state, and we are in high tax brackets. And so that means I work with somebody who is an amazing individual bond person who knows what they're doing. And so that's it. And I work with a financial planner. I pay him because he does things for me that I will not do for myself, like analyze the very best retirement plan for someone who's self-employed. And let's do that. Or crunch the numbers about some investment idea that, I don't know, that someone brought to me. Or more importantly, look at my own retirement planning numbers. And
with another eye.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I can... Listen, I'm a spreadsheet queen. Like, I can run those numbers pretty easily, and I know but different permutations of it are interesting. Hey, let's look at a strategy for converting IRA or pre-tax money to a Roth, and what's the best idea around that? Anyway, I think that I'm happy. I feel like the same. Someone said, "Oh, how could you possibly pay someone? You yourself are a CFP." I said, "Okay, now." there are many people who can go out and paint their own home. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I could probably figure that out, but I would rather be working with a professional, someone who's looking at it all the time. I do not trade in my account. Mm-hmm. I absolutely don't trade. I did it in the beginning. So while I was in the beginning of CBS, I was managing the money and trading a little bit on the side and doing a little fun stuff. My brother-in-law was a commodities trader at the time. We set up accounts. We started doing some stuff, and then I just couldn't. I got too busy.
Wait, so you just said you like to pay and you believe in it, but then you're saying most people shouldn't be paying? Where?
I think you got to know yourself. I think there are some people who really need financial advice. Yeah. And I think there are some people
because it goes back to emotion, right? To your
absolutely.
And the numbers I see from Vanguard are, a third of people do everything 100% on their own, which makes sense. And then about 2/3 have some sort of money manager, some sort of advice. And that can be on a continuum. It could be as let's say, non-specific and inexpensive as maybe a robo, all the way to the Goldman Sachs person that's going to charge 1 or 2% a year, right?
Right. I mean, so the reason why people hire financial planners is that they have complicated financial lives or they have something going on. So let's say you call me up and you say, Jill, it's Wes. I'm thinking about retiring in, 3, 4, 5 years. But I've been so good at managing my money during this accumulation phase. The idea of a strategy about how to manage that money and pull the money out, a decumulation strategy, I don't know how to do that. Yeah. So I think that's very common. I think that when you have a life event, it can be really helpful to have a financial planner with you. So that could mean that a birth, a death, a marriage, a divorce. It can mean the sale of a business. It could be some sort of windfall that you've experienced. Any sort of catalyst moment that seems like a lot to handle. And it goes back to your point about emotion. If there's it's like, oh, I'm nervous to deal with this big chunk of money, then that's when you need somebody. Yeah. Absolutely. I remember I had this big time corporate attorney from Boston who hired me. The guy was way smarter than I am. Okay. So let me just be clear that, he's advising companies.
As an advisor.
As an advisor.
Yeah.
Like this is, 25 years ago. And I said, strikes me interesting, like, this stuff. He says, let me tell you what I know. I know that I will shoot myself in the foot every single financial decision that I make. I know it. I could actually advise someone else. I cannot do it myself. I will analyze it, and then I won't do anything. And or I'll jump in because I am involved in some sort of anecdotal way with something. It seems like a good idea. Yeah. So sometimes
so true,
right? Like sometimes it's like, I'm going to hire Wes because Jill's just not going to make the best decision for Jill. Mm-hmm. And that can be something. But, complicated financial issues are really good with an objective eye. Mm-hmm. Like it's very hard to be objective when it's you. Yeah. It is.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think of it, kids. Like, obviously, I do this for a living as well, and I have my entire career. I mean, I started in this 1997. I was an intern at a big, Wall Street firm, and then now I have an RIA, and I'm fee only, and have been for many, many years. But it is always I would say 2/3 of our folks are decumulation, which is a little scarier, a little less easy. Hey, I need a certain amount every single month forever. I don't believe in annuities, just to your point. They're the easiest sales pitch in the world and probably the worst product in the world. They are so easy to sell. It's like every time I'll hear a pitch, I'll be like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm and then, but the thought of, hey, I've got this scenario. I mean, it's almost every single day I get a call that is, whether it's literally I've got someone graduating and they've got a car and I have a car and I don't want to, maybe you should give them our car before we buy another car, or we're about to sell this house. I got an unsolicited offer for the house and we want to move to St. Simon's. It's every day. It's some sort of relatively complicated issue that they just want to hear it from somebody third party. Like, hey, is this crazy or not?
Right. And sometimes it's about career stuff, which I find
Oh, you
fascinating.
just did some career stuff recently on
Yeah.
CBS.
Yeah. And it's really been interesting. I have gotten, I'm sure from your client base that you hear this, but I think that the pandemic has really gotten people to think deeper about the way they work, who they work for, what they want in the future. And it certainly has prompted a lot of people to consider second careers, third careers, or transitions, saying like, I've just heard from a lot of folks, I'm around journalists. It's been a very grueling couple of years for journalists. And I have friends of mine who are just like, look at this with me. I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted. It's going to be a new day. Let the young guys take over and, let's see. And so I think that when you have another set of eyes, someone who gives you permission to do that, how great is that, right? You say, hey, you know what, Wes, you can actually afford to do something else. Now, of course, that can cause you to have all sorts of weird emotional reactions to that, but it's kind of cool.
What are some of your statistics about, I know you just did some podcasts about this, on what's the percentage of people that are unemployed that are thinking about maybe starting their own business or changing careers? What was that stat?
The stat is so wild. There's been a 41% increase in new businesses in the first year of the pandemic. So essentially February 2020 to February 21. Okay. 41% increase from the prior year.
By the way, we've had like a 20-year decline in new business formation, which is amazing.
Right, okay. Right. And so there are people who are now saying, I really want to start my own business. Maybe it's out of necessity, but maybe it's like, you know what? I don't want to do this. And Pew just did a study of people who were unemployed. And it was insane. It was 2/3 of unemployed people who said, I'm considering doing something different. Now, I think it's sort of interesting that, without getting political here, but, the idea of that extra unemployment benefit that everyone's like, oh, my God, it's terrible. I can't hire a restaurant worker. Well, maybe restaurant workers just picked their heads up and said, holy crap, you know what? I can't curse on your show. That was a crappy job. Okay. Yeah. Like, that's a shitty job.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it is a shitty and hard job. Okay.
And I don't get paid enough.
I don't get paid enough. So maybe I should figure out something else. I had this great conversation with somebody who was looking for salespeople. And I said, if I were you, I would get one of these hiring websites and I would write a spot, like a little thing that basically said, bartenders, come talk to me. Because a bartender is a great salesperson. Yeah. Let's be honest. I mean, who could convince you to get a $22 glass of Macallan when the bottle is just $70?
That's true.
Come on.
Yeah.
So I think that people are looking around. People are anxious. And, I'm sure that you talk a lot about retiring early. Mm-hmm. But I'm not so sure that that's exactly what people want. I just really do believe, like I've always felt like the FIRE movement, it's really about the FI, not the RE. Yeah, that it is financial independence is critical, and people just went through a traumatic year. Mm-hmm. And they may not be able to get financially independent. They may not even be able to retire early, but they may say to themselves, I am not going to actually be happy doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, you have to have a certain amount of money to be able to do that, but I think it's great. And I think that there are a lot of people who are 50 years old and saying, there's another 10-year chapter for me. There's another 15-year chapter for me. Can I make less money? Hey, Wes, look, run the numbers for me. I have been a teacher for blankety blank years. I'm going to get a pension.
I'm getting burned out.
Right. I am fried. And I am sure that there are people who are in lots of different industries who feel that way. And they don't want to retire early, but they do want the opportunity to do something different from age, 50 to 70.
Yeah. I like that. That's a good way to put FIRE. FIRE, the FI makes sense. The RE, it's more about the FI than the RE. And what Jill's saying is so true. One thing that I found, and this was, I don't know, maybe it's because there was the name on it, but back when I did Retire Sooner Than You Think, my early retirement thought was like, if you're 62 and you're stopping working, that's pretty early. Mm-hmm. And that created some momentum around people finding me and saying, hey, I really want to retire early. And then it was like, I'm 59. I'm 55. And the numbers got younger and younger and younger. And one thing that, I was like, look, guys, I said retire early, not like retire way early. And that's what I found. But the practical part of that, Jill, and I'm sure you've seen this, is I labeled it as what I call the retirement gray zone, which is the 50-year-old that kind of has almost enough money, but it's a little too early to tap in. And then it's like, look, you've been making $150,000 a year. You don't need to save anymore. Now you could actually scale back to something you don't hate, and maybe it's 50 grand a year, and that's enough to not spend, but it's like a gray zone. It's a warm up for retirement. I think that's a really helpful concept.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call it, a friend of mine, Michael Goodman, who's a financial planner and investment advisor in the city, he hates the word retirement. He goes, I would like to reframe that as unemployment, because you are not getting any money. And so if you want to actually look at the next 35 years and figure out whether you have enough money to live the life you want to live, that's one thing. But, when I was writing my book, I felt like everyone has a retirement chapter that's like save for retirement. So I wanted to write my retirement chapter about the mistake that people make, which is they retire too early.
Too early. Okay.
They retired too early, and they spend too much early in their retirement.
All right, give me an example on that. And this goes back to dumb things that smart people do with their money.
Right. So,
this is your book, yeah.
Right.
Tell me some of the dumb things that smart people do.
Oh, I got $3 million and I'm 55 years old. And so, I feel like, for every million, I'll grab 30 grand a year, 90 grand. I can live on 90 grand, and then I'll collect Social Security, and that's great. But then you don't live on 90 grand. You have to pay for your own health insurance until you're 65. And you do the thing that we all do, which is you have a friend who dies very young, and you say, God damn it, I'm not going to be like Joe, and I'm going to enjoy myself. Aren't I entitled? And you spend a lot of money early in your retirement. And then all of a sudden you get to be 65, 70 years old, and you've depleted that $3 million, and you haven't spent 90 grand a year. You spent more like 120. Now there's not enough money there, really. And you're still pretty young. So I think that...
So you've seen that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Like a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot.
Okay.
So I am a huge fan of work, mostly because I come from workers. Except my dad wasn't. I mean, my dad wasn't a hard worker. He was like, I have a great job.
Yeah.
I'm a trader.
He literally did that forever and he stopped working. That was his last job? Or?
Well, sort of, kind of. He was a trader on the floor of the American Stock Exchange. He was a trader off the floor. He just, with a bunch of friends, got some money, and they traded from off the floor. But he essentially retired when he was 59, 60. And it was terrible. It was terrible for him, I think.
Oh, he didn't like it. He didn't like it.
No, I think he would like it. This is the thing. I think it's terrible. I'm judgmental, of course, of my own father. I think that it was too early for him to be disengaged from structure. And I think that he wallowed a little bit. It was tough, and then he started doing things like helping people start little businesses. Not like I'm going to talk, it's going to sound like he's a private equity guy, but he's not. I'm talking about a guy who was like, I have this tiny little business that makes uniforms, and I wish if I could just get 100 grand, I would have more operating capital. I mean, my father was like, well, let me look at your business. And he would do the little things like that.
Oh, cool.
But I think that not being engaged is a terrible thing when you're young. And I think one of the problems about retirement is, and when you really say, I'm not going to work, you think you're not going to work, and you miss your camaraderie. Your spouse is great, but that's a lot of time. And a lot of your friends aren't retired. Yeah. And so I know a ton of really, really rich Wall Street people who will not retire because they're afraid. They're like, I don't know what I would do with myself.
Yeah.
And there's only so much golf you can play.
And when they get to a certain point, if they've got $20 million, $50 million, they really... The calculus has changed because you could walk away at any time. So it does take work. It takes on a slightly different angle when you have full independence.
Totally. It's like the great FU fund that you have. You're like, I don't have to do this. I remember so every year I do for the CBS staff, I do like a big thing, financial planning and retirement for all the
CBS folks
for the news division.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing because there's a bunch of people in the organization who are union folks. They're camera operators, they're sound people. and they have pensions. And so there's something really interesting about that. So every time when there's a big buyout, I'll get, hundreds and hundreds of people asking me, what do you think for me? What do you think for me? And you know what? The buyout is great. You get your pension, but you're on your own for health insurance.
Yeah.
And I said, so listen, that pension's great, but, you have to think. And I said, by the way, are you sure you know what that means to retire, to not work anymore? It sounds great, but maybe not. And so Hey,
by the way, what's the ratio? How many of the folks, your typical lump sum versus pension, 200 grand in a lump sum, or $1,200 a month? How often do you see? What's your ratio on the monthly versus the lump sum?
Oh my God! Well, I mean, if it's real money, it is usually the monthly is so much better. The deal is so much better, and there's no risk. I do a lot of radio work in the Seattle market because they have a big station there called Cairo. And so
that's right. Your show is syndicated on how many stations? Like
I don't know, 150 or something. But part of my job for CBS is that I'm on their radio network. So
CBS Radio,
yeah. So we have affiliates. We have 400 or 500 affiliates. So my voice is out there, and then I do these quick interviews with our big markets. So the top 20 markets, they have access to me when there's breaking news. And so I get a lot of people who ask me questions from Seattle because it's a big market. And guess what is in Seattle? Boeing.
Microsoft and Boeing.
And Microsoft.
Yeah.
And
Boeing's tons
Boeing,
of packages. Yeah.
So I get a lot of questions about it. It's fascinating to read. And people send me everything. They're like, let me just I'm going to send you all my numbers, right? I cannot tell you how often you look at the numbers and you're like, wow, this is actually just a no-brainer. Just get your monthly income. Now, it's antithetical to the way probably you think about it, which is you want your liquidity, right? But presuming that, most of the people that I talk to on my shows and the people who are asking those kinds of questions usually have this wonderful situation where it's like, I've got the pension and I've saved in a deferred comp. And I think that combination, it's like, oh my God, I can get, this one guy I spoke to just recently, I get 90 grand a year in my pension, and I got $2 million in my retirement account. Oh, that's nice. 90 grand a year, knowing you can pay your bills is pretty great.
But if you had no money in the retirement account and 90, you'd say,
that's
hey,
a problem.
Take the $1 million lump sum instead.
Right, because I think liquidity, so there's like keys of my
Probably
life.
More than $1 million, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the keys of my life are you always want liquidity, which because it buys you options, right?
Yeah.
And I can work my way out of a lot of situations, but I cannot work my way out of undersaving. In other words, you can be a really crapo investor and still be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you could have worked with the biggest idiot who put you in a bunch of front-loaded mutual funds and paid a terrible price for that, but still be fine.
Yeah.
But what you can never make up for is you just didn't start saving early enough. It's really hard. It's really hard.
What are some other, because I know I don't want to keep you forever. I feel like you're like my kindred sister in the financial world.
I like that. I could be like your big sister because you're much younger.
Yeah. I mean, maybe like a year younger. But I've done I was telling Andrew, who booked this, who got you to come on the show, I was like, I feel like Jill is kind of just a more successful version of me.
I wouldn't say that. You've got a thriving business. We are in very different businesses, and like we're in the same business, but very different.
Yeah, I guess I've skewed way more to the RIA side, but
I never want to do that again.
I've been doing radio for 14 years on WSP in Atlanta, and then I've been doing radio forever, but the podcast thing is somewhat new to actually focus on it, and it is it's different. It is a different medium. I thought it was going to be the same. I'm like, radio podcast same. It's different.
It's funny when people ask me about podcasting versus radio. There's obviously the commercial incentive is different, and also the type of people who listen and the way they listen is different. So I agree. I had a radio show first, and then it morphed, and then I started a podcast.
But you do both now.
Yeah. Yes, because I'm an idiot.
God, it's a
and
lot.
because I don't have an RIA, because I'll never make as much money as you, basically. Listen, you make a lot more money running money, right?
Yeah,
You just
yeah.
do. I mean, I left a firm after the crisis in 2008 that had $500 million or 600 million. Okay. So let me just say that it would have been much more lucrative to stay there. But I love what I do.
Yeah.
And I never, ever want to deal with clients ever again.
It's so funny. I was wondering as we were talking. I'm like, man, I wonder if I could get Jill to come work with us. I was
Yes.
like,
No one's ever had that idea.
And I know. That's why you're probably good about literally, like, nope, just don't even ask.
No.
All right, hold on before we go. I got to
Take
ask you
your
a
time.
couple.
I'm going to relax.
So I've got to drive to the Philadelphia airport and
Goodness
12
gracious! Stop at
in
the Nick's
15
and
minutes.
get a good sandwich.
Let's see here. What have I not asked you? Oh, by the way, the smart people do the dumb things smart people do. One of the things you talked about is they put off. They don't do wills. They may be overly optimistic. Hey, I'm never gonna.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever gonna happen to me. I looked up this statistic because I always state this. Most millionaires don't have wills, and I finally was like, I'm gonna look it up. 78% of millennials don't have a will, which that doesn't surprise me. 64% of Gen X doesn't have a will. That starts to surprise me, and then 50% or almost half of the 53 up group says they don't have a will. What is that? Why?
They're idiots and they're selfish assholes. That's what they are.
Okay.
That's what they are. I say that sort of in jest, but not really. If you've ever been involved in the management of an estate without a will, it's brutal. It's just brutal. It's so mean to your heirs.
Yeah.
So what are the barriers of entry? I don't have any money. I don't need it. Well, did we just go through a pandemic in the last year where a lot of people had tubes thrust down their throats, and maybe they would or would not want that? I think you should write that down. So I am at the very base level, like a will, a power of attorney, and a healthcare proxy. By the way, it's funny when you say that about the millennials. An older millennial is 40 years old now. And that's shocking to me. If you're 50, you're just a dingbat. But if you're 35 and 40, if you're married
and you got kids,
or coupled, or you have kids and you're a single parent, or you're taking care of your older parent that is, trying to make it through this world, it's so easy. So I used to be very religious about get an estate attorney. Mm-hmm. Now I really don't care. I'm like, you know what? If you're going to do it, you're going to do it online, then go do it online.
Just at least go do it online.
Do
kind of
something.
Like your point about just at least invest, even if it's not
do
perfect.
Something. Just do something. Policy Genius. The woman who runs Policy Genius, the CEO, is Jennifer Fitzgerald. I love her. She's not. I mean, I think she sponsors the show, but not even because I have a relationship with her. Because through the sales people, but they created an online product that's quite good. Now, if you have a net worth that's less than $1 million, it'll work for you. If you have some weirdo, complicated life and it's your second marriage and you got millions and millions of dollars, it's not going to be quite as good. Mm-hmm. But then get your ass to an attorney. Mm-hmm. It is just not that hard.
Yeah.
And it's emotional. And the funniest knockdown, drag-out fight, which I must recount to you.
Please.
That I saw in an office. In my office,
you're going back to your RIA days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was a fight between a married couple, and they were talking about the estate planning. And I was like, I just don't understand why we can't get this going. Like, I had given them an estate attorney. I'm like, and they would cancel. And then finally, the reason why not. Why? Because we can't agree about our kids and guardianship.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be your goddamn brother, and it's not going to be your horrible sister. And then so that's a fight. And one of them marched out of my office, slammed the door, and shattered a glass pane door.
Oh, my God.
Because she got so completely incensed. So I get it. It's emotional. But, what I have also learned from great estate attorneys is that these are living, breathing documents. You can change them. Do something. Like, even if it's like, okay, you know what? The only person we can decide upon to get to take care of the kids is our parents, which is a terrible idea. But if that's the only one you can decide upon, great. And we'll figure it out later.
It's so funny. You're right. You almost need a catalyst. I remember, Lynn, the catalyst I remember so vividly was that we were going to a wedding in Costa Rica. And you think about Costa Rica, you think like Romancing the Stone, like a little plane's going to come in and probably clip a tree, and you probably, you have a high probability of not making it. And I remember we had just had our first child. And she's like, no, we're not going to your buddy's wedding in Costa Rica until we at least do a will. And I did it. I literally went to LegalZoom. I think back, I don't know if it was a LegalZoom back then.
Yeah.
He's 14 now. And I did it. And I've done 3 iterations of it as life's gotten more complicated. 3 years ago, I did trust and more trust planning because then I have 4 kids. To your point.
No, because I'll tell you why. Because you are so rich. That's why.
It's complicated for the 4 kids. I got 4 little kids.
What are the ages, please?
Oldest is 14, and then so 14, 11, 9, and 5. And
you guys are gluttons.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
That's a lot. You better keep managing money.
I'll be doing this now. I am Retire Sooner podcast, but to your point, when you're loving what you're doing, it just doesn't there's no reason to ever not keep going. So it's a core pursuit of mine. Let me ask you last question. So it's funny that we talked a lot about the Wall Street folks that are plenty of people that have plenty of money that still keep working. There is a group. I tend to have a bunch of families that, I think of if I could paint a picture of the most common story is the 30-year AT&T, because we're Bell South AT&T hub back in the day. And AT&T, I'm sure they'll never sponsor my show, but they're like the worst when it comes to people. They call their layoffs, they actually, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but they call it surplusing.
Oh, bro.
Have you ever heard that? So
No,
AT&T
that's awful.
every year does, just in Atlanta, they'll do like 2,000 surpluses a year. They don't call them early retirement package. They call it surplusing. Like there's a surplus of humans, and we are going to get rid of the surplus of humans here at our company. So AT&T calls it surplusing. So 30 years, same company, marginal, like barely making any more money today than you were 22 years ago, and the commute of an hour this way and an hour back, and they're just beating down I'm so ready to go.
Yeah.
And that person, I say, so for that group, I call these core pursuits, and I found that happy retirees have 3.6 core pursuits, unhappy retirees have 1.9. So that's that's part of my money and happiness research. But what is your hobby? So core pursuit is a hobby on steroids.
Yeah.
What is yours? What's your number 1, 2, or 3?
Hold on.
Core pursuit. Jill Schlesinger, CBS Money, business analyst.
You see this little dog that's lying over here?
Yes.
There are 2 of them. One's in the other room.
All right, what are
So my pursuits are that I'm in love with, because I'm a typical lesbian. I have to have dogs and talk about them.
Have to have dogs.
Must.
Okay.
It's a must. So when I think about
dogs, tell me about your dogs real quick.
I had to look and see who that was. That's Trixie. Charlie's in the other room.
Trixie and Charlie.
I'm a very physical person. I already told you I was an athlete. So
Yeah.
I'm an aging athlete with many aches and pains. So I love to cycle, and I love to walk my dogs on these really crazy long walks. They're
Oh,
tiny
cool.
dogs. They're like 12 or 13 pounds. And we walk miles. Like this morning we walked.
In the city, or do you go somewhere?
No, I live near a park. So I live
Okay.
near Riverside Park. So today, let's just see that we've walked 8 miles today.
No
Total
kidding.
so far. So I walked all the way up through the park, and I love doing that. And so other things that I'm really passionate about, I do like charitable stuff. I have to really be engaged. So we're part of a big charitable organization that is an environmental organization. And I'm on the board of the LGBT Center of New York, which is the biggest LGBT center in the country. And so I love that kind of stuff. I would never want to do it full time. Like 1 or 2 boards at a time is fine with me. And, I have I've got involved with I guess we're on our 19th year that my girlfriend comes from a very big Italian family and I have this very small Jewish family, and between the two we seem to be very busy with our families. But the crossover thing is that both families are very into theater, so we do a lot of Broadway, we do a lot of
so your
opera.
families actually get along.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
that's cool. Okay, that doesn't
Yeah, I
happen
mean,
all the time.
No, well, I mean, please, that's for sure. So we're into the arts, and we're all of a sudden life takes over, and